So this is going to be the end of section 1.4. We still have a chunk of problems to do. The next 4 problems are fractions, so let me work on 38. I need to get the numerator down to a single number separately from the denominator. So I'm going to separately work on the numerator and then the denominator. In the numerator, I need to do the division before the addition. So I'll do the 6 divided by 6, and then I'm going to add the 4 and 1. The numerator should come out to 5. Now I'm going to separately work on the denominator. In the denominator, it has an exponent that needs to be done first. That's going to be negative 2 squared, which is negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4. So the denominator is going to be negative 5 plus 4. It's an adding, but the signs are opposite, so I subtract and take the sign of the larger. The denominator comes out to negative 1. So the numerator simplifies to 5, the denominator simplifies to negative 1. I'm left with positive divided by negative, which is a negative, and 5 divided by 1 is 5. So the answer to 38 should be negative 5. I'll do the same for 40. In 40, I'm going to work on the numerator first. The numerator is 2 times 2 minus 5 quantity cubed. In the numerator, I need to get the parentheses down to a single number. 2 minus 5 is negative 3 because that's the same as 2 plus negative 5. Signs are opposite. You subtract, take the sign of the larger. Next step in the numerator is the exponent. Negative 3 cubed is negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, and that's negative 27. And then I finish up the multiplication. Positive times a negative is a negative. 2 times 7 is 27 is 54. So if I haven't messed up, the numerator comes out to negative 54. I'll do something similar for the denominator. The denominator is 14 minus 20 divided by 4. I need to do the division before the subtraction. That's going to leave me with 14 minus 5, and 14 minus 5 is 9. So I've simplified the numerator and the denominator. This is a positive divided by negative, so it's going to be negative, and 54 divided by 9 is 6. I can do that without a calculator. If you're really cruddy with your arithmetic, only in chapter 1 do you have to worry about getting some issues, having some issues not being able to do numbers. If you're really wretched and you need like a sheet of time sheet and a divide sheet, talk to me. Maybe we can work something out so that if you don't have your facts memorized, that doesn't penalize you. So the answer for 40 should be negative 6. 42. It has an absolute value. This absolute value needs to be simplified like a parentheses. And inside the absolute value, I have a double negative that I'm going to make positive. So first step is parentheses, and the absolute value works as a parentheses. So parentheses, absolute values count as parentheses. I'm going to do that first. And then inside the absolute value, the double negative went positive. Now the numbers have opposite signs. I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the larger. Negative 5 plus 3 is going to be negative 2. And then the absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2. Left with just an addition problem. Numbers have opposite signs, so I subtract and take the sign of the larger. And my answer should be negative 2 for number 42. 43, I had a wrong answer, so I changed the problem, and I don't have a printer with me, so I just scribbled the change. And the answer that I got for 43 is 1. I'm worried that I'm going to get a wrong answer for problem 44 because I probably did the same calculator steps, and my answer here could be a fraction, and we haven't got to fractions yet, but it is what it is. 44 has kind of 2 parentheses that need to be simplified. I'm going to do this parentheses first, and then I'm going to do the absolute value second, and then I'm going to do the division. So inside the first parentheses, there's multiplication and subtraction. I need to do the multiplication first. So inside the parentheses, I'm going to bring down the -3 and the minus sign, and -4 times 5 is -20. If I wanted to, I could start working on the absolute value, but just to keep it clean, I'm not going to work on it just yet. Now inside the first parentheses, that double negative I need to make positive. I'm getting progressively lazier explaining what step I'm doing next, hoping that you can know the steps without me explaining exactly why I'm doing the order that I'm doing. And now inside that first parentheses, the numbers have opposite signs, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the larger. Work on the absolute value next. Inside the absolute value, I need to do the exponent first. -4 squared is -4 times -4, which is 16. I don't need this 17 in a parentheses, but it's not wrong to have it in a parentheses. And inside the absolute value, the -4 squared turns to 16. And then I'm going to add the 1 and get 17 divided by the absolute value of 17. The absolute value of a positive number is just that number made positive. Let me drop this parentheses that I don't really need. This gives me 17 divided by 17. My answer is 1. I have that one right. Let's do 43 together real quickly, just so you can have something in your notes in case you can't get it. So mess here. Sorry. So on 43, if I was working it, I don't have paper handy. First, I'm going to do this parentheses, this -9 minus, and I'm going to do the multiplication of -3 times 7 first and get -21. So if I'm doing 43, I do the left parentheses first. Inside the left parentheses, I do the multiplication. Now I'm going to make the double negative positive. And I really want some paper here, so this is too much to follow, I think. Let me do this on another sheet of paper because this is a bit much. So 43, just so we can make sure we're all on the same page, the problem is -9 minus -3 times 7, close out my parentheses, divided by absolute value of -3 squared plus 3. Working on the first parentheses first, I need to do both parentheses, get them down to a single number. And inside that first parentheses, I need to do the multiplication before the subtraction. And -3 times 7 is -21. I could start working on the absolute value. That would probably be smart, but I'm just trying to do one step at a time to make it followable. Now the double negative inside the first parentheses I can make positive. And again, I can work on this absolute value now if I care to, but I'm just holding off. Now the first parentheses and numbers have opposite signs. I subtract 21 minus 9 and get 12. Make the answer positive. I probably shouldn't have wrote the parentheses anymore. It would have been better probably if I just wrote the 12 without the parentheses. Now I'm going to start working on that absolute value. Inside the absolute value, I need to do the exponent before the addition. The exponent is -3 times -3, which is +9. After I get rid of the exponent, I could do the addition of 9 plus 3 and get 12. And then the absolute value of any number is just that number made positive. If it's positive already, I can just drop the absolute value signs. And now 12 divided by 12 is just 1. Alrighty, there's some more kind of meaty problems coming up here. I mean, they're almost a bit ridiculous, but it kind of just to get us good with orders of operations. So when I look at 46, I'm going to work on this first parentheses first, and then I'm going to worry about the absolute value that has that evil trick in it that we talked about at the beginning of this section. First parentheses, I need to do that multiplication first. So I'm going to leave the -1, bring down the plus sign. 4 times minus 5 is minus 20. Inside the first parentheses, it's adding, and both the numbers are negative, so I'm going to add them and keep them negative. I'm going to start working on the absolute value. The evil trick, this negative, because it's not in a parentheses, this is the opposite of 4 squared, so it's 1 negative and 2 4s. The exponent inside the absolute value turns into a -16. Because the negative is not in a parentheses, I square the 4 and then I find the opposite of it. I'm making stars as opposed to x's for my times, it's just habit. I probably don't need to keep the -21 in a parentheses. And for my absolute value, -16 plus 2, those numbers have opposite signs. I'm going to subtract those. And now I'm going to find the absolute value. The absolute value of -14 is +14. And now I'm left with -21 times 14. I don't care to do that without my calculator. So -21 times 14. I get -294 for an answer. I wouldn't ever put a problem on a test that you couldn't use a calculator for that had -294 for an answer. And I'm going to do this problem again in my head to make sure I'm okay. Let me do the first parentheses. First parentheses is -1 plus 4 times -5. First parentheses comes out to -21. Absolute value is -4 squared plus 2, which is -14. So that comes out to -21, that comes out to -14. Absolute value is +14, and then -21 times 14, -294. What a horrible answer. It is what it is. Maybe we have time. Do you want to try, we'll try 45 together. So for 45, you can pause the video and give it a go. It's -1 plus 3 times -2 times the absolute value of the opposite of 3 squared plus 2. First parentheses, get it down to a single number, multiply the 3 and the -2 and get -6. Inside the first parentheses, I'm adding and both the numbers are negative. I'm going to add them and keep them negative. Then I'm going to start working on the absolute value. The first thing I need is the opposite of 3 squared. That -3 squared written like that is 1 negative followed by 2 3s. It's going to be a -9. I don't need the parentheses around that -7, but it doesn't bother me as much as having a positive number inside a parentheses. Now inside the absolute value, the numbers have opposite signs. I subtract and take the sign of the larger, get a -7. And then the absolute value of -7 is +7. I'm going to multiply, and for 45, my answer should be -49. Ugh, I don't like these. Just one more super grungy problem, and then we'll get to some less grungy problems. And there's still a good chunk of problems left. Sorry for the length of this video. Let me write 48 on a different sheet of paper because I think it's too much for me to do with scribble around. So 48 is 7 minus 4, bracket, which is a parentheses, 16 minus 3 times 5 minus parentheses 2 plus 11, parentheses, bracket, divided by 2. Brackets are parentheses, parentheses are parentheses. There's parentheses inside brackets. I need to do the innermost parentheses first. So first step, I need to do the 2 plus 11. I'm going to try to get this bracket down to a single number before I do any of the stuff outside the brackets. But inside the bracket, there's a parentheses. I need to do that first. So I'm going to bring down my 7 minus 4, bring down my bracket, 16 minus 3 times 5 minus, I'm going to say minus 13, and stop writing that parentheses, because 2 plus 11 is 13. So I've gotten rid of the parentheses inside the bracket. Now I'm worried about inside the bracket. I see 16 minus 3 times 5 minus 13. I need to do the multiplication inside the bracket before either of the subtractions. So I'm going to do 3 times 5, bring down the 16, bring down the minus sign, bring down the minus 13, but in place of the 3 times 5, I'm going to put 15. Now I have the bracket down to 3 numbers, and it's all subtraction. So inside my bracket, I'm going to do the left to right now, the subtracting. 16 minus 15 is 1. Still don't even have my bracket, which is a parentheses, down to a single number. 1 minus 13, if I need to, that's the same as 1 plus negative 13. If there's only one negative sign, you subtract and take the sign of the larger, and that's the case in both of these. There's a single negative sign. I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the larger. 1 plus negative 13 is negative 12. Finally, that's the parentheses phase. I got the innermost parentheses down to a single number, the brackets down to a single number. Now there's no parentheses I need to deal with, there's no exponents, but there's both multiplication and division, and I do those from left to right. So on my next step, I'm going to do that multiplication of 4 times negative 12. Positive times a negative is a negative, and 4 times 12 is 48. This, I'm almost guaranteed when I peek at my answer that it's not going to be correct right now, because I probably press buttons on my calculator. Next step is to do this division. I'm going to bring down the 7 and the minus. 48 divided by 2 would be 24. Positive divided by negative would be a negative. So this comes out to 7 minus a negative 24. Double negative I'm going to make positive. And for an answer for problem 46, I'm going to put 30. That's not 40. Oh, that's not 46. That's 48 that I just did. And my answer for 48 should be 31, and certainly it's wrong on my answer key because I didn't do them by hand. And I forgot how poorly my calculator can do orders of operations when they get really cumbersome. I believe 47, the answer is 1, but before I commit to that, give it a try and see what you get. Right, just a few more problems. It's a new style of problem, but it's a friendly style of problem. The rest of the problems in this section give me expressions with variables, and they tell me what numbers to plug in for the variables, and it's just an order of operations. 50 gives me the expression 15w minus 12p. It wants me to change w to 5. It wants me to change p to 7, and simplify using orders of operations. When I change a variable to a number, it's not required, but it's always safe to write the expression without the variable. So I wrote 15w without the w, wrote 12p without the p. I left parentheses where the variables were, and now, and for w, I'm going to plug 5. And for p, I'm going to plug 7. So this is what 50 wants me to do. It just wants me to change the variables to the given numbers. And now just do orders of operations. I'm going to do this multiplication of 15 times 5 first. This multiplication of 12 times 7 second. So now I have 75 minus 84, which I can do without a calculator. If you need to use a calculator for such big numbers, I have no issues with that. I'll keep the numbers much smaller on the test. And now either 75 minus 84 or 75 plus negative 84. Those will give the same answers. The answer to this should be negative 9. So number 50. My answer should be negative 9. It's not like x equal to negative 9. It's just the number negative 9. 52 wants me to replace the x with a 2 and the y with a -3. So I'm writing the problem without the x and without the y. Where the x was, I'm going to put a -2 in. Where the y is, I'm going to put a -3 in. Now it's just orders of operations. I do the multiplication before the subtraction. 2 times -2 is -4. And now I just have a subtraction. And the double negative I'm going to make positive. If you're adding and the signs are opposite, you subtracting, take the sign of the larger. My answer for 52 should be -1. 54, I'm going to write this as 6 plus 10 parentheses divided by parentheses, changing the x out and the y out. In place of the x, I'm going to put a 7. In place of the y, I'm going to put a -2. And now this is a very careful orders of operations. If I look at my key, it might be wrong. First step, I see multiplication and division. I need to do the multiplication first of 10 times 7, which is 70. And then the division of 70 divided by -2. 70 divided by 2, half of 70 is 35. Positive divided by negative is a negative. And now the numbers are being added, but they have opposite signs. So I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the larger. 6 plus -35 is equal to -29. So my answer for 54 should be -29. So you should give, the even odd problems 49, 51, and 53 on this sheet a go. We're getting pretty close to the end. We just have a handful of problems left to do. A few more just like this. 56 gives me a squared minus 4ac squared. And I'm going to plug a number in for a, both a's, and a number in for c. And for the a, I'm going to plug in -2. For both a's, I'm going to plug -2. And then for the c, I'm going to plug -3. That's the substitution part. Now I'm going to do the exponents. The first exponent is -2 inside a parentheses squared. It's -2 times -2, which is 4. And then I'm going to be lazy and do the second exponent first. -3 times -3 is +9. So done with the exponents. There really aren't any parentheses I need to deal with because there's not parentheses that are more than a single number. And now multiplication from left to right. First multiplication, 4 times -2 is -8. Second multiplication, -8 times 9 is -72. Now I'm adding numbers with opposite signs, so I subtract and take the sign of the larger, and I'll get -68. On the test, I promise I'll keep the numbers smaller than this. If you can't do 4 plus -72 without a calculator, I don't want it to penalize you for your grade. Few more problems. 58, I need to change the x to 4. I need to change the y to 2. And I need to change the z to 3. Now I have a parentheses that I need to work with first. So inside the parentheses that this problem has, I need to get it down to a single number. And inside the parentheses, first I'm going to do the multiplication of 2 times 2. Now inside the parentheses, I just have 4 minus 4, which is 0. So with a couple steps, after I substituted, I was able to do the parentheses part of my work because I've got the parentheses down to a single number. Now exponents, 0 squared is 0 times 0, which is 0. So I did my parentheses. Now I'm going to do my exponent. 0 squared is 0. And now I'm going to go multiplication from left to right. First multiplication is 6 times 0, which is 0. Second multiplication is minus 3 times 3, or 3 times 3, which is 9. I get 0 minus 9. And 0 minus 9 is going to be negative 9. 0 plus anything is that number. 0 minus anything is that number. 0 minus 9 is negative 9. Just one more sheet of problems. It leaves us like with 3 each, maybe. So for each one of these problems, I want to plug negative 1 in for x and 2 for y. In problem 60, I'm going to change the x to negative 1. I'm going to change the y to 2. So x equal to negative 1, y equal to 2. Do my orders of operations. First operation, I do the exponent first. Negative 1 squared is negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1. And positive 1 minus 2 is subtracting a positive is the same as adding the negative. So positive 1 minus 2 is the same as 1 plus negative 2. And both of those, either 1 minus 2 or 1 plus negative 2, both of those are going to equal negative 1. My answer for 60 should be negative 1. For 62, I'm going to replace the x and the y with the numbers that are in the header. The x I'm going to replace with negative 1. The y I'm going to replace with 2. Inside the parentheses right now, I have negative 1 minus positive 2. That's the same as negative 1 plus a negative 2, because minus a positive is the same as adding the opposite. Now inside the parentheses, which I need to do before the exponent, I'm adding two numbers. They're both negative, so I'm going to add them and keep them negative. That's going to give me negative 3 squared. Should write equal signs because what I'm writing is equal to the line above it. Negative 3 squared is negative 3 times negative 3. And my answer to 62 should be positive 9. One more problem. For 64, I'm going to write 4 parentheses squared minus 3 parentheses parentheses plus 11. Inside the first parentheses, I'm going to change it to a 2 because that variable is y. And then I'm going to go negative 1 for the x and 2 for the y. Now it's just orders of operations. First bit of my operations is 2 squared. I do the exponent first. And then multiplication from left to right. First multiplication is this 4 times 4. Second multiplication is 3 times negative 1. Third multiplication is negative 3 times 2. So I got rid of my, there wasn't a parentheses to simplify. I did exponent, first multiplication, second multiplication, third multiplication. Now it's just addition and subtraction. I'll work from left to right. I'll make this double negative positive. I'll make this 16 plus 6 plus 11, making the double negative positive. And then I'm going to do 16 plus 6, which is 22. And then 22 plus 11 is 33. My answer for 64 should be 33. Sorry, this is a long section, longer than I wanted it to be. Orders of operations are pretty important. That comes up a decent amount this semester, so you just need to be comfortable with it. Hopefully I've done enough here that you feel good about orders of operations. These are probably more complicated than we'll see for most of the semester, but I'd rather hit you hard now so that it'd be easier later.